Prairie Mosaic is funded by the Minnesota Arts and Cultural Heritage Fund with money from the vote of the people of Minnesota on November 4th, 2008, the North Dakota Council on the Arts, and by the members of Prairie Public.
Welcome to Prairie Mosaic, a patchwork of stories about the people and places that contribute to the arts, culture, and history in our region.
Hi, I'm Barb Gravel.
And I'm Bob Damback. On this edition of Prairie Mosaic, we'll listen to a modern bluegrass band, follow a North Dakota senator's political career, and visit a museum to learn about Minnesota inventors.
Kevin Miterman is a reconstructive plastic surgeon by day and a guitar maker by night. After medical school, Kevin decided to learn more about guitar building and trained with master builders in Massachusetts. By combining advanced materials like carbon fiber with wood and traditional guitar building wisdom, Kevin builds double-top acoustic guitars that are as technically brilliant as they are beautiful.
There isn't a single moment when I'm in here making guitars that isn't joy. I'm Kevin Miterman, and I'm a guitar maker, and I've been doing that for about 18 years. And I'm also a plastic surgeon in town. I've been a guitar player since I was about 9 years old. For some reason, the tone of the guitar, first time I heard a guitar played well, it just thrilled me to no end. Since I was quite a young person, I've always built things. And when I was in high school, there was a guitar maker there. He had a guitar store where he would sell regular guitars, Martins and Taylors and all those things you hear about. The guitars that he was making sounded better, intrinsically better, and I wanted to know why. Then I went off to medical school residency, but then when I started my practice, I decided I wanted to recapture some of these things that make life special. And so I would take my vacations from my job, and I would go off for, say, a week or two at a time to a guitar making school in Massachusetts and work with these master guitar makers. And once I'd learned what I needed, I started building guitars myself, and I've been doing it ever since. It's meditative. People ask oftentimes how this relates to surgical skills and surgical training, and I think that it really is very much the same. In other words, my joy for working with my hands, I suppose, came first, and it manifested in my job, which is surgery, but also my working with wood. And surgery is, I love doing it, but there's an intensity to it, and this is sort of the antithesis of that intensity. It's peaceful and is completely without tension, and that's lovely. And so once the shape is determined, then you determine the woods you're going to use. And sometimes that's a purely aesthetic choice. Sometimes certain players want a certain wood for a certain tone. So I kind of get all those things, literally put them on the bench and start designing when it's just raw, rough hunks of wood. This is where everything begins. I buy the wood in a rough form. For example, here's some East Indian rosewood that still has the saw cuts on it from the mill. Its mashing sides are here, and these are also rough, but they'll be eventually thinned on the sander and then bent into their shapes. And so I used to have only 2 shapes of guitar, and now have collected 8 or 10 different sets of work boards. So here's how a neck begins, a big hunk of wood. But then at some point you get down to just whittling it, basically. These are little surgical lights that I bought from a surgical supply house. I also learned that in the operating room there are always 2 lights, one over each shoulder, so no matter where you're working, you're eliminating the shadow. And so when I'm working, I'll often use my 2 little lights, and I'll have 1 light coming over each shoulder. And so no matter where I'm working, there's never a shadow. And it makes for some great detail work. It's fun to see as you start scraping back, bringing the woods level and getting the glue off of there. It's fun to see the the lines pop. This is rosewood and this is poplar, and it's fun to see as you're scraping the result poke through. And then I assemble the back to the sides, and I have the first step. And then I start on the top. I choose those woods. All right, so this is the way I make my tops using the composite materials. So traditionally, a top for a guitar, which is the vibrating element of it, comes out of a single book-matched set of wood. These days, people are using composite materials to try to get a guitar top that is as resonant and is as strong, but is actually lighter, so you get more sound and maybe even more controllable sound. From the audience perspective, no one would know there's any difference. For example, this is a double-topped guitar with all the composites and all the fancy things inside the guitar, but you'd never know it. All guitar tops are not just a piece of wood, but they're braced somehow on the inside with a series of braces. Traditionally, these are solid wood. I use a little thin sheet of carbon fiber, sandwich that between two thin pieces of wood, and you get a brace that is inflexible because of that almost like an I-beam on the inside. It's very strong. If I get a request from a guitar player for something, I'll work it up in a prototype first so that I can change one element at a time to try to hone in on the sound that they're looking for without having to build a whole new guitar. So there's a 6-string. Here's a 12-string prototype. This is a Nara wood guitar. It's got a really big sound. I look forward to coming in here at the end of a long day. I guess I'm sort of a geek. In other words, I don't do much besides my work and spend time with my family and then make instruments and plan guitar concerts. It's really a good life. It's a simple life, but it's mine and I like it.
America has not always presented a united front of support in times leading up to war. An opponent of American entry into World War II, North Dakota Senator Gerald P. Nye's willingness to take on President Roosevelt, the powerful munitions industry, and America's financial kingpins earned him the nickname, the Giant Killer.
In some ways, it's kind of a sad legacy. Here's a man who had a chance to really make a difference. A man who could have added significance to the status of the nation, whether it was in preparedness for World War II, whether it was as a government watchdog. But Nye just couldn't quite step away. Gerald Nye was a United States Senator, was appointed to office after Senator Ladd passed away in office. He's the second youngest member of the Senate that was seated at that time. He's only 33, but he's brash. He clearly knew how to play an audience. Some have even suggested that the way he dressed was to stir people a little bit. Because if you see pictures of him as a younger man, he's got a very unusual haircut. I believe I once read someone said it had been clearly cut by a Dutchman with a bowl. So he's kind of a backward, hayseed kind of boy. You know, he's North Dakota, he's 33, and I think people underestimate him for a while. What he's best known early on for is starting the Teapot Dome investigation. At one time, probably based upon a mispronunciation of his name, they were referring to him as Gerald the Giant Killer. As the 1920s roll along, he's a man who needs a project. They say Joe McCarthy was debating between communists and dairy farm support, and he picked communists. Well, for whatever reason, rather than jumping on the agricultural bandwagon, Nye jumps on the peace initiative. And looking at the munitions industry during the First World War, Nobody really wants to jump on the bandwagon to do this investigation. The economy's doing well, and nobody really seems that interested in undertaking the investigation. And ultimately, Nye does. Small committee, I think about 6 or 8 senators. And by the time they start pawing through the record books for who loaned money to whom, how much was loaned, we're also coming into the Great Depression. It's the vortex where you've got men who are out of work, men who are protesting for their bonuses after the war, but yet Henry Ford or whomever still looks kind of fat and happy. And you take the loss of your son, his physical handicaps, and someone who seems to be doing well at a time of depression, and you've got a wonderful subject to investigate. And he rides that pony, and suddenly it seems quite feasible that we had entered the war not because of freedom of the seas or not because of making the world safe for democracy, but because J.P. Morgan needed a little more cash.
It is not going to be a simple matter for America to stay out of it. American commercial interests, selfish and greedy, sensing the opportunity for profit from war, would do as they have done in the past if left to pursue their own course.
Ultimately, the Nye Committee leads to a series of laws, the Neutrality Acts that are passed in the middle 30s, varying limits of what can be done by the president. So FDR can't loan money for Britain to buy guns. We can't deliver guns or whatever to Britain. Nye, he was a newspaperman, and he probably knows better than pretty much anybody how to manipulate the press. In the United States, we don't usually think about an anti-war movement until, like the 1960s with the Vietnam War. But in the latter 20s and into the early 30s, there's a very strong anti-war movement.
The arms embargo is far too great a security to American peace to permit its surrender without a last-ditch fight.
Nye was not playing a game. He wasn't doing the suave debate. He was more hammering that we don't need to be there, or we shouldn't be there. He seems to have set his mind on that particular element, and even got Dr. Seuss's attention. He does caricatures of Gerald Nye and his ranting and raving. He's catching attention, but I don't think it's the attention he wanted, or wasn't the attention that was going to make him successful. The story goes that he's giving a speech and someone hands him a note that says, Japanese just bombed Pearl Harbor. And he looks at it and keeps on with his speech against war and against how Roosevelt was going to drag us into this war. And somebody slaps him again and hands him the note, and he keeps on speaking against the war. And then a few hours later, President Roosevelt is declaring war. He supports the Second World War after it comes, but by the time the Japanese attack Pearl Harbor, he's become irrelevant.
It may not be common knowledge, but there have been many inventors throughout northwest Minnesota over the years. Currently, a traveling exhibit chronicling such people is making its way across the state. We caught up with the exhibit recently at the Mahnomen County Museum.
The traveling exhibits are always a big draw to the museums here in northwest Minnesota, simply because they're something different, something new. They bring out topics or people that you might not otherwise. So for us in Becker County, we featured Lake Shirts, which is a local business that still exists and was started in a basement making t-shirts for the beach, right? And now they employ over 400 people. They have contracts with the NCAA. So it's become a very nationally known business. And the great thing with with some of these connections is that you might make those connections with businesses or entrepreneurs who wouldn't be in your museum otherwise. I think people forget that history is happening now. It's not just something that's in the past. It's not a stagnant thing. And so I think a lot of the benefits of these traveling exhibits is that it gets those kind of contemporary connections in place so that the people who are featured on the panels have relatives or descendants that could bring them into the space and can give us new ways of interacting with the history that's happening around us.
Just through the Minnesota Legacy Grant Amendment, and our consortium, we meet every month, and we just got together and thought it would be a real interesting exhibit to highlight our people from the area that we can be very proud of. Mrs. Frances Kiana is a Ojibwe lady. She had made black ash baskets. She weaved them, and she was a very important elder of the community. So her baskets are all over the world. They're in the Smithsonian Institute and even in Europe, and we're very proud to have had her a part of our community. And the other person was Dr. William Curson, and he was born in Holland, but he came to America, and he was a farmer in Gregory Township in Mahnomen County. But then he also developed a seed corn, and it took him like over 10 years to develop the seed corn for this part of the country. And that was our inventor, and we're very proud of him.
So I think Widman's is an obvious choice in terms of all of us love candy, right? Who doesn't? And certainly that was a business that was, again, a very kind of locally grown that's now reached a larger level, and everybody likes those chippers, right? We also have people who have invented things like Polaris snowmobiles, which of course is huge in not only our part of the world, but other places. We have Matt Tracks, which again is a huge industrial business. We have Koya Knutson, who I think is very interesting in that she actually was basically the creator of the student loan system for the federal government. So I think some of those big, kind of larger scale industries or things that people have used to help them through their life have their roots in Northwest Minnesota. The Minnesota's Historic Northwest was founded just at the beginning of the 2000s, and this was a group that was originally put together to try to kind of organize the rural museums in Northwest Minnesota. We're very geographically separate, and so it gives us a chance to interact with our colleagues. It also gave us a chance to self-promote or mutually promote, so we could pool our limited resources into larger scale projects. For publicity, for tourism. We worked with the Minnesota Tourism Council and Minnesota Historical Society to help with some of those things. It's also helped us to really standardize our kind of best practices for museums, so we can learn those things, get some professional development, get some standards in place for small museums so that we all can go from county to county and see that the history is being preserved in a proper way.
Funding is top priority, and I think that's with every museum. Every small museum deals with that. We do not receive much help from the county, so it's mainly memberships and memorials and donations.
Legacy funding for Northwest Minnesota, specifically in collaborative efforts like this exhibit with Minnesota's Historic Northwest, has really made an enormous difference in terms of access to not only history, but also to kind of facilities, traveling exhibits, some of the basic things that small museums need, like heating and cooling, right? Things like archival supplies, materials, being able to produce quality exhibits that we might not be able to afford otherwise, being able to produce quality programming for people that we might not be able to do otherwise. So it's really allowed us to almost act as though we are a large-scale institution on a more kind of intimate rural level, which is a wonderful thing. I think we're very you know, stoic Scandinavian types in Northwest Minnesota, maybe German once in a while, right? And I think that because of that, we're very kind of modest and unassuming in terms of our accomplishments. And I think this exhibit really gives us a chance to let some of those people shine a little bit who maybe we haven't realized are from Northwest Minnesota, and bring out the best of us.
There's a good story about him because he was...
Useful Jenkins, a band from Mankato, Minnesota, introduces a modern, edgy interpretation of bluegrass in their original music. Their lyrics are socially relevant and combined with unique instrumental arrangements to make for a wonderful listening experience.
When it all just up and change, seeing the world around is coming. It's going through emotions, never seem to be deranged, until the thread unwinds, coils up again. We can't slow down and we can't pump the brakes. Girls are locking up on me, out there for everyone to see. Together we can navigate, steep is great in a hydroplane with momentum building now, momentum building. Sometimes it's far too dark to see, like a blanket pulling over me. When it's time to pay the fiddler, I will greet him happily. Cause I've seen sunny days and seen the darkest shades of gray. Nothing can contend with what she's given to me. The path you choose to take and all the loving that you make, build you up or bury you 6 feet in the ground. Because home is what you make it, as long as you can take it. Home to me is where she can be found. So fill me to the brim, because contentment is a sin. I'll drink down and fill it up again. I push my worries to the sides of happy tears and satisfy the hunger that I feel thin. Fill me to the breaking point where nothing can contain all this pressure that is building pain. When my mouth is dry, I can't rely on you to fill me up. Fill me up. Tears satisfy the hunger that I feel within. Fill me to the breaking point where nothing can contain all this pressure that is building pains. When my mouth is dry, I can't rely on you to fill me up. Oh, to fill me up. To fill me up. Fill me up. Fill me up. Don't you fade away from me. Fill me up. See you stay. Fill me up. Don't you fade away from me. Don't you fade away from me. Fill heart is up in chains. We've seen the world around us come late. It's going through the motions, never seem to be deranged, until the thread unwinds, coils up again. We can't slow down and we can't pump the brakes, girls are locking up on me, I've never really want to see. Together we can navigate the steepest grade in a hydro play with momentum building now, momentum building, momentum building, a momentum building, momentum building, a momentum building, momentum building, momentum building, momentum building, a momentum building.
If you know of an artist, a topic, or an organization in our region that you think would make for an interesting segment, please contact us at prairiemosaic@prairiepublic.org. I'm Barb Gravel.
And I'm Bob Dambach. Thank you for joining us for this edition of Prairie Mosaic.
Prairie Mosaic is funded by the Minnesota Arts and Cultural Heritage Fund with money from the vote of the people of Minnesota on November 4th, 2008, the North Dakota Council on the Arts, and by the members of Prairie Public.